To shift gears just a little bit for our third performance, Joey Ghirardelli, who's been wandering around speaking to himself in the hallway for the past half hour, we expect him back, and he's going to be performing an event called Extemporaneous Speaking. This is an event where students answer a question about current events. They have half an hour to go prepare the topic after they've had a chance to think about it for a little while, and then they walk back into the room and they give their performance. Joey did very well in Extemp this year. He was a state finalist and is the International Extemporaneous Speaking District Champion, and he competed at the Tournament of Champions at Northwestern 2 weeks ago. So let's see what question he chose. Extemporaneous Speaking, Joey Ghirardelli.
Over the past half-decade or so, the economy of Venezuela has slowly been deteriorating, but it has recently created such a climax, it is impossible for them to continue on in this current state. See, the basis for all of this is coming after Hugo Chavez's death, the successor Nicolas Maduro, through incredible mismanagement of funds of Venezuela, and including their huge amounts of natural resources through crude oil they have at their resource, they have brought the nation into a huge wave of poverty. According to the Borman Foundation, a prominent nonprofit to fight poverty in the world, they report that approximately 81% of the people in Venezuela are currently living in poverty, and reporting additionally that approximately 75% of them have had to cut back in some form of famine or eating due to this huge poverty sweeping the nation. So this has been so closely affiliated with the president Nicolas Maduro that even going as far as to claim that the weight lost from this famine, people even going as far as claiming that that is called the Maduro diet. Bringing us to today's question. Will the anti-Maduro forces of the world be able to effectively instate actual positive change in Venezuela? And sadly, the answer is no. Due to the inevitable failing of, first, any political civil action done by the people of Venezuela, secondly, done by any protesting action by the people of Venezuela, and finally, due to the failing of international sanctions on Venezuela. So, first, the first most obvious solution to this issue of trying to bring in about significant change within the government would to be done through elections. But for Venezuela, that is sadly not a possibility. Just last month, on April 22nd, Venezuela had a presidential election, an election which Nicolas Maduro won in a landslide. But there were some flaws with it, because according to the Senatorial Committee for Foreign Affairs, this was not recognized by the United States as an actual free democratic election. It was simply a ploy to just reinstate Maduro as more of a dictator than a true president. So, it is clear that the people of Venezuela, and specifically Maduro, are willing to rig elections in any way they'd like in order to keep and to continually have control in this nation. And just last year, in the summer of 2017, there was elections for a second legislative branch, which Maduro himself created to bring himself more power. It was reported by the people that created the voting machines in the same article from the Senatorial Committee that 1 million ballots were actually shifted to favor candidates that were friends with or of the same political ideology as Maduro. So it's very obvious that any actual election would just simply reinstate Maduro or his friends into power. And many people are looking for a solution to this in the hope of a referendum. Reported by Al Jazeera on May 12th of this year, if there are 6 million votes, 6 million signatures on a ballot that would say that they want Nicolas Maduro ousted, he would be removed. But as this article goes on to say, this is not truly as hopeful as it really appears, because he would simply be replaced by his vice president, who is also a socialist of the same ideology as Maduro, and would likely be no better than Maduro himself. So sadly, this referendum possibility is not truly as hopeful for any actual change as many people around the world believe it to be. So that is the first way that they will fail, anti-Maduro forces will fail to bring about actual positive change because they are unable to do so under the typical political civil action. So it leads us to the second obvious cause of chain of events. It is throughout history, whenever people's voice is unable to be heard, they simply fall back upon actual action. But this is once again not a real possibility for the people of Venezuela. Because, as an article from the Brookings Institute in this January pointed out, that the military of Venezuela has firmly backed Maduro, considering his appointing of a lead general to the head of the corporation for oil within Venezuela, a corporation which makes up for 95% of all profits from exports of Venezuela. So, with this such huge, powerful, influential military leader given such a huge favor by Maduro, this Brookings Institute article goes on to explain that Maduro essentially has the military in his back pocket, and they would be in no way willing to bring it to be any part of a coup, and would actually strike down a coup, meaning that a more action-based political movement would not be effective because of this huge amount of and incredible outclassment of the military against the common people. And it's not even like the people of Venezuela can passively wail down against the Venezuelan government, because, as reported by a CNN article of September last year, it's actually illegal to protest the government in Venezuela, even going as far as to have potential for 10-year sentence in jail for actual protesting of the government just by using their speech. So this is the second way in which the people of Venezuela are paralyzed in their impossibility to truly bring about change because they are unable to do so even from a more action-based political movement. So it has become incredibly evident that the people of Venezuela have no real positive route to bring about positive change themselves, bringing the responsibility and any potential for this to be the case to come from the international community through the form of sanctions. But once again, sadly, considering the current status of the world, these sanctions would not be sustainable and would likely crumble within a very short amount of time. As reported by the New York Times on April 26 of last year, the United States is officially withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal and reimposing huge sanctions on Iran and their oil that nation produces. And according to CNBC, on January of this year, this reimposing the sanctions on Iran would take away 250,000 to 350,000 crude barrels of oil from the world market every single day, and increasing the price of gas by potentially 10%. And that's just the sanctions put on Iran, not to mention the sanctions put on Venezuela. And because of this drastic cut in supply, the demand would skyrocket to an extent that it would be impossible for the sanctions to not crumble due to the potential for huge amounts of wealth nations could get by breaking these sanctions and going into business with Venezuela. So it is obvious that these sanctions would not really be sustainable because it would take away this incredibly needed natural resource of oil from the world economy at a time when it is needed to such a huge extent in every part of our lives. So ultimately, it shows us that there is no real possibility for the anti-Maduro forces of Venezuela to bring about real positive change, due to the fact that the people of Venezuela themselves are paralyzed both through civil political action or through more an action-based protesting. And finally, that the international community will not be able to make sustainable sanctions to truly bring about and pressure Maduro to change and make Venezuela a better place. Thank you.